So this section is about a young man named James. He was a doctor with the Red Cross in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War and the Cambodian War. He becomes a prisoner of the Khmer Rouge. It's 1976, and I'll just jump in. That night, the rains started. The grass in the wall dripped tiny beads of water. James felt unbearably cold. He remembered one weekend taking his younger brother to the Pacific Ocean. They had caught the ferry across the Strait of Georgia and then driven the car to the western edge of Vancouver Island through the trees with their towering canopies. His brother, Hiroji, 10 years younger, always wanted to hear about Tokyo, but James had little to say. He remembered the bomb shelters and the charred dog he saw once, and the brief sojourns home his father made, and how the war in China had sculpted his father into someone both powerful and empty. His little brother waited patiently, and James just shrugged and said, "Fuck Japan." The bottom of the car was rusted through, and the floor on the front passenger side had a magnificent hole. Drop something and it was gone forever. How many things had they lost to that gaping hole? His house keys, Hiroji's plastic watch, apples tumbling from the grocery bags, all sorts of rubbish. But one day you'll take me to Tokyo, right, and show me things. Show you what, James had said, shrugging. I'll introduce you to the girls I knew when I was 4. He could smell the sea through that hole long before they got there, the salt heaviness of it, the fresh greenness of it. He loved the ocean, no matter how desperately cold it was. He'd bought a wetsuit, a used one. He'd had no money for a new one because he was addicted to the fury of the tide. Those currents knocked him back, they overpowered him, and yet he felt alive, not fragmented, not broken. He had tried to explain this to Hiroji when they lay that first night in their one-season tent. "It's religious," he said finally, lacking words. Hiroji said, "I like it too." In the narrow glow of the flashlight, Hiroji's face was round and small. James wanted to tell him, "I'm not your father. You don't have to look at me like that. You can yell at me and tell me I'm a fake." Instead he said, "You didn't pack your school books, did you?" Hiroji looked at him nervously. "Just a few. I'm gonna lock them in the car." "Ha ha," his brother said. "Ha ha," James answered. The rain started. It drummed the ocean. It slipped through the high canopy of trees and reached their tent, a tapping of needles. "Ichiro," his brother said tentatively, "do we need to sleep in the car?" "No, brother," James said. "It's fine. I chose a good place for us." James reached his fingers up and touched the tent walls, which were heavy with moisture, rain filling up all the pores. Soon the wind would force its way through. "Just close your eyes and get some sleep. The light will wake us early tomorrow." "Okay," his brother said. "Okay, James." He had felt sometimes like Hiroji's father, as if the best part of his youth had already gone by. But those moments were fleeting. James had only been 17 years old, after all. He was just a kid. It rained all night. Sometimes he heard voices floating through the prison. He heard trucks stalling in the mud outside. James knew that they would come for him in the middle of the night, cut his throat, and push his body into a pit before he was even alert enough to be afraid. He didn't want to die in the unthinking mud. He couldn't let this happen because there were people relying on him. There was Soria, his wife, and the promises he had made. Kwan, a ghost, a stranger, comes to him in the shape of his brother. He leans his body against the wall. His black hair falls forward over his eyes. His skin is the color of cedar. He had thin lips and high, faint eyebrows. Every movement Kwan made was precise. as if wasted movement itself was a crime, like spilled water in a time of drought. Juan had Hiroji's watchful eyes. He was the opposite of James. He was not reckless or weak or self-pitying. Juan took his time because he knew that the seconds were precious, doing the right thing in the right moment every single time was the only thing that could save him. He studied Juan and remembered his kid brother. The way Hiroji never spoke out of turn, never spoke without some parting. If you didn't know him as James did, you would have thought that Hiroji was a bit slow, a bit dull, but really he was constantly rearranging things in his mind. He was opening and filing the information as it arrived, rather than letting it overflow and become meaningless. Yes, his brother was careful, and he had been that way even when he was small. In the corner of the prison, Hiroji, or was it Juan, or was it some metamorphosis of the two? Or was it James, as he once was, the James who might have grown up in Tokyo with a father and a language of his own, with a box in his heart to hide his fear, shifted his weight and knelt on the ground so that now they could see each other clearly on the same level. The boy studied him. There was only one man in this room and one ghost. When James woke at the next knocking on the door, it was still pouring. Rain was running thinly across the floor, cupping the light all to itself. Juan, the man's voice said. James made no answer. Juan. James reached out and plucked the weeds growing through the cracks. He ate them and drank foolishly the dirty groundwater. Eventually he heard the sound of the man's rubber sandals on the concrete landing, walking away. James' clothes were wet, and they smelled of the earth outdoors.